Alright everyone, of course the major news of today that we have to talk about, probably in multiple different videos because of the different thoughts that I have about this. I've got a lot of complex thoughts, politically, socially, etc. about this issue. Ukraine has officially been invaded by Russia. Although the other day it was already arguably an invasion, peacekeepers were moving into parts of eastern Ukraine. You've had a number of reported attacks, and I don't mean like, hey, the Russians threw a grenade through my window and, there's no pictures or anything and it's being reported on on a third-rate local news station or something. It's actually official. Like, you've got reports all along the border that you've got problems going on right now and the Russians have quite literally marched in. Where should I even begin here? Well, first and foremost, down below there will be links and a pinned comment if you're watching on YouTube, yada, yada, yada. Nobody cares because, World War III supposedly just began. First, let me address that. I don't think that the Western leadership, the different schismatic groups that now comprise subsets of NATO, effectively, it used to be U.S. is up here, you've got a few other major players, and then everyone else is just sort of jumbled underneath. Now you have a situation where, because of the weak U.S. economy, the fact that the U.S. doesn't have an executive leader at the moment, they have a steward. Biden is not effectively anything more than a placeholder. He is not really in charge of foreign policy, and Putin, by the way, fucking knows this. You have other groups in the West rising, specifically the Germans, the French, the British, and possibly the Polish-Hungarian sort of Visegrad group alliance, although Britain is seeking to edge in on that as well as in Northern Europe. Meanwhile, Germany and France clearly have their sphere states. They are still major powers in the world politically, and they have nuclear weapons. I'm not Germany, but France and the UK, rather. And Germany hosts U.S. nukes. That may change because of this, by the way. Here's what happened. Putin didn't dare to do this when Trump was president. Let's get this out of the way first and foremost. That would never happen, because Trump would actually have done something meaningful about it. When Biden removed Nord Stream sanctions, he made a tactical mistake that will ring throughout the ages, because it helped to further the divide in NATO. I'll explain how. I realize that all the Western countries and some of the Eastern ones are all condemning Russia. That's just the on-the-paper knee-jerk political reaction. Look deeper into the fabric that holds the Western military system together. Before, you have effectively one central major player, and everyone sort of gets along. Now you have a situation where you have different egotistical, neoliberal, globalist leaders that all want a bigger slice of the pie for political reasons because of the strain that globalism is putting on their population. If this doesn't kill globalism off and give us a real good reason to turn our back on China completely and shut them out of the Western economies of the world, I don't know what'll convince you. Who do you think's bankrolling this anyway? Effectively, Russia can be used as a land siege cudgel by the Chinese. There's not much the West can do about it because its leaders are too busy bickering. And while the legacy media told you that was because Trump was making mean tweets, bullshit. It's because in the absence of strong central U.S. leadership, you have 5 or 6 different central powers in the West. Well, naturally, they're going to have different ideas on what slice of the pie they want. Not through invasion in the sense that Russia's doing it in Ukraine. That's a little bit different. They want to annex land or have a satellite state with a warm water port next to Crimea. By the way, there are multiple reasons they would want that particular chunk of land. Maybe not like that, but look at Iraq. Look at Afghanistan. We march in, we occupy it, we effectively temporarily annex it, we drain it dry, we set up a puppet political system. It's not much different than what Putin's doing here. If he doesn't outright annex any of this land because, the people held a referendum and they want to join Russia, well, yeah, you're free to join Russia. Imagine that. If that doesn't happen and they say, well, no, this is just independent Ukraine that we happen to like politically, and part of it breaks off, which, by all accounts, they could easily do this. It'll be the same thing. It'll just be a satellite state. It'll be a satellite state and Putin's ally and be de facto annexation. You've created a puppet. Difference is when the U.S. has been doing this lately, it's halfway across the world, requires enormous amounts of expenditure. This is right next to Russia. They can just march in. They don't even need a naval presence. Right now, by the way, Turkey holds a huge card, and it'll be interesting. Erdogan has condemned this, But Erdogan also loves to straddle that line, and he's got grotesque levels of economic problems. Does he close the Bosphorus to Russian ships? Maybe he says, no, we're not directly engaged in this. I know, maybe we will, maybe we won't. And by the way, it won't impact anything. It just keeps, any of the Russia's ships that are outside of the Black Sea from operating there. This is mainly a land invasion. Now, will it cause World War III? Will this cause a nuclear confrontation? Is this going to cause fallout real life? While it would be interesting to glow in the dark and not have to be fed to do so, I don't think everyone's going to get ghoulified over this, because Ukraine, again, this is not a NATO country, so the military alliance aspect's off the table. It reflects similarly, although on a different scale, what Russia already did with Crimea. And we already effectively know how the U.S. will respond. Nothing. You've crossed a red line, we're putting sanctions on you, and that's it. Weak leadership, just like under Obama. That's why they marched into Crimea in the first place and took it over outright, annexed it. Well, we basically gifted you this land in the past, so we're taking it back now. Well, they're doing that effectively with eastern Ukraine. What else can be done would be my question. If the nation doesn't have a direct, explicit military alliance that you can say, look, you've invaded them, we have no choice but to fight you now. And by the way, it would be suicidal for either Russia or the U.S. to engage in such a situation. It would trigger mutually assured destruction, arguably. The loser, both countries could agree to fight without nukes and do it for an extended period of time, but in the end, when one side looks like it's going to lose, they'll press the little red button. That's the basic concept. I don't think, though, that it would be worth the West's time to engage in conflict over this. My thoughts are that we should have tackled this years ago. Way back, before Ukraine was invaded, we should have tackled this issue. We could have either attempted to appease the Russians with a permanent ban on NATO membership for Ukraine and said, look, effectively, we just don't care about it. By the way, Obama half-heartedly engaged in that basic premise. Or we could have just said, fuck you, admitted them to NATO, and then said, what are you going to do about it? Either of these would have been far better than the lackadaisical alternative that was pursued, because now we see the end result of it. It has led to war. Obama and his VP at the time, by the way, Biden, oversaw Crimea. You have several years where Putin doesn't dare to do anything because Trump's actually a leader. Now you have Biden in office. Oh, would you look at that? The same fucking shit happened. I love how Stephen King, really good at writing fiction, which explains this tweet. He comes out the other day, Putin has made a mistake because now we actually have a man in charge in the U.S. Biden's out to lunch even more than Stephen King's characters in his novels. The dude's demented. He's not a leader. He's barely coherent. He's not feasibly, technically a president at all. He's a steward. Other people are running everything in the White House right now. By the way, Putin could very well have dirt on the Bidens. And he doesn't give a shit about the sanctions. Obama did that years ago. Then they go away slowly over time because nobody really gives a rat's ass. I care about, I guess, the people that will die because of this. As far as the political structure of Ukraine, what can we do now if we intend to get involved at all? The U.S., West, whatever. Sell them lots of weapons. That's basically it. Arm them up. By the way, we should be, why don't libertarians and other people, why don't all the populists who will get backstabbed by Biden over Soto, I'll get to that in a second, why don't you call for the arming of the entire Western civilian population, the eradication of anti-weapon laws across Europe and in the United States and Canada and stuff? Well, we might get invaded, so we've got to have a martial population. Yeah, better fences make better neighbors. So does a larger caliber gun. We should just crank them out. We manufacture so many of them. We'd make huge amounts of money. We could make a lot of jobs. Hell, we ban the Chinese components that are probably used in some brands. Just saying. Here's the thing. There's not much for the West to do. And as a last thought, I'd say Biden is gleeful over this. I hate to tell you this, but Biden actually scores a huge win. Not only just because now he gets to be a wartime president, something that I predicted, by the way, before the last election. Trump didn't start any new wars. Biden manages to step in it only a year in. Now, that begs the question, did he have a hand in causing this? Well, it's totally coincidental that this invasion comes a week before the State of the Union that had been pushed back to a historic end date. March 1st. The latest it had ever been before, if it was held at all, and a couple times it wasn't, was mid-February. Normally it's held in January. What a coincidence. Astonishing. 1 week exactly to the day before the pushed back State of the Union, the Russians start their invasion, and now they full-on invaded a couple days later. Just a few days before Biden has to give a speech that otherwise would have been, hey, my economy sucks. Yeah, the job market sucks. Our border's being underwhelmed. Nope. Now he can say, and he alluded to this the other day, oh, look at how sleazy this is. Not in a crack-smoking way, just generally sleazy. He said, well, these Russian sanctions are going to cause higher prices. They're going to cause a little bit of pain, but we have to go through it as patriotic Americans. Would you look at that? All of a sudden, all of the inflation and other problems economically that have been happening anyway for the last year are all Russia's fault. They're not Biden's fault. It's because we sanctioned the Russians. Well, it marginally increased prices. Yeah, inflation went up. Oh, that's natural. Yeah, just ignore the entire last year of your life. Just ignore the entire first year of these problems happening. Just ignore those of us who warned that if Beijing Biden was in there, a war would begin. And this is not a little war. Not hey, we invaded Grenada or something. We occupied an island for a few weeks. We moved in a handful of people. We surged in Syria and added 100 troops. Not a little conflict. This is an all-out invasion of a sovereign nation by its neighbor. By the way, this is the first time you've had this kind of major conflict on European soil in quite some time. Look back at the history and find when the last time was, and maybe you'll be a little bit more cautious about being a warmonger and wanting to get other countries, by the way, involved, because it could get messy. However, I'm not going to predict World War III. Again, interesting as though it would be to see mushroom clouds and go scav the wasteland and patrol. Well, I can't patrol the Mojave here. I can patrol the tidal flat that would engulf half of the Netherlands, I suppose, as the dikes fail. I could go crabbing. Be easier when you can see them in the dark, in the shallows. I don't think that will happen. It'll be a major conflict. It'll be very, very positive for all the neoliberals in the West. And they get their Russia hoax back. Well, you see, we told you Russia was a problem. Ergo, Orange Man bad. You've got to be patriotic. You're a problem if you don't support the Biden admin. You're a problem if you're protesting right now. Just ignore the mandates that we're slowly retiring. Just ignore every other problem that we've been causing for the last few years. Censorship is fine because we're in war. And by the way, suit up, boy. Maybe you'll have to go to war. And it'll be just like Iraq, maybe. It'll be a bunch of old people with a lot of money. Their kids won't go, by the way, unless they want to go to a nice, safe, so-called combat zone for a few hours to get another medal for when they do a congressional run. It'll be all the poor kids. And the Democrats will gladly send all the little minority kids over to die. all the disenfranchised, barefoot Appalachian kids, the hillbillies, they get to go fight. Their penthouse asses aren't going to go. So yeah, wonderful story. Wonderful news day. As though there's anything else to talk about. Imagine having to actually cover other news today. Interesting times. So yeah, I don't know, could lead to World War III, but it is a war. That's already there. So stop begging the question. Just acknowledge what's already there and the role of a lot of Western politicians. That multipolar NATO model working so well for you, neolibs, ain't it? That's about all. Peace out.